Could you place any point in time in which the union quit almost restricting Negroes out and?
Well, I don't mean to give the indication that they have quit. It depends on the segment.
Well,
of
it
the
depends
labor
on
movement.
what union too.
Well, for instance, in the early days, and probably to a degree now, the building trades section of the labor movement, where you have the skilled craftsmen, what have you, is almost exclusively lily white, and it's because of the nature of the union and primarily the attitudes of those who are in the craft unions. For instance, in the CIO oriented unions, which were organized along industrial lines as opposed to craft lines, there's been a greater increase in the not only the status of Negro workers, but the economic conditions also. I'm not saying that the attitudes were not the same, but the philosophy of the organization tended to work for all workers in a given area as opposed to, for instance, keeping the membership white and therefore not affording Negroes the opportunity to get into the union. We have seen over the past few years some of these barriers coming down, but you got a twofold thing, coupled with a shrinking job market and many of the craft unions, and the fact that there's just an out-and-out bias against Negro workers coming into these unions.
Well, now the AFSCME, when did it start specifically?
Well, our union goes back probably some 30 years. We're in the Midwest, about Wisconsin, where it was more a legislative focus to the organization in the sense of improving civil service systems, merit systems, attempting to get some laws passed which gave public employees primarily the right to lobby for benefits.
That's right, I guess Wisconsin would be.
This pattern went on for some time. I think the present move toward full collective bargaining as it exists in the public sector possibly started maybe 6 to 7 years ago, where our organization adopted the attitude that public employees are no different and should be treated no different than employees in the private sector, that they should be entitled to the collective bargaining process with the full rights to strike as exists in the private sector, and the full rights to a binding agreement with the employer. This was sort of a new thing in the labor scene, primarily because the general public had been indoctrinated to think that it was a privilege to work for a local government as opposed to it being a job as any other job in the public sector. And this may have stemmed from the Depression days when the government was sort of the employer of last resort. And I don't think that necessarily has changed up to this point, but among the many things that a public agency may be, it is also an employer in addition to having the responsibilities for providing public service.
Also, civil service sort of took the place of
Right. There was the feeling that civil service, provided really the ultimate panacea in terms of employment.
Yes.
And that there was
what
job
else
security.
could you want? You have civil service, yes.
And we've come to realize that civil service really is not the best thing for the municipal employment because it doesn't give the employee the opportunity for representation before the employer. The civil service boards and systems are appointed bodies and therefore become an extension of the administrative functions of local government. In a broad sense, it's theoretically an agency that selects the employees who are eligible to be employed. But the real crux of the matter is that it excludes as opposed to includes, and this is particularly detrimental as far as black employees are concerned. Theoretically, the civil service agency is to design the criteria, the tests, and the qualifications for a job. Yet, we found in so many areas that the guidelines that they set down in 90% of the cases don't apply to the function that's to be performed. It's only a test of mental ability as opposed to your ability to perform the job.
Which was always the euphemism to keep people out, keep the black people out, right?
So we've adopted the attitude that even if civil service exists, there should be a relationship between the employees through their representative and the employer that simply says that the employees and the employer are equal in this process of negotiations, and they sit down as equals and deal with the questions that affect the workers through written agreements, through memorandums of understanding, and through a regular contract form. And we have many cases where civil service exists, where we have contracts with the agency that they operate side by side.
How many members does the AFSCME have?
At this point, we have approximately 430,000 employees throughout the United States, and we also service employees in the Canal Zone and in Puerto Rico.